Dr. Swaminathan, I had two questions. One is, what is the WHO stand on where emergency use authorization, what emergency use authorization threshold is, where emergency use should stop and full authorization starts? And the second is about, whether this, the way in which the world has come together to develop the vaccine, whether there can be learnings from this and whether this can be templated for future development of not just vaccine but also drugs?
Yes, those are excellent questions. And for the first one, yes, we have the criteria. So we say, for example, that a vaccine should prove to be at least 50% efficacious with a lower border of confidence of not less than 30%. Now, this was set at a time when we did not know what the efficacy of vaccines against this virus is going to be. It's very encouraging now today to see so many vaccine candidates that seem to have efficacies of over 80% or even over 90%. So 50% is a minimum benchmark. And similarly for safety, the developer needs to provide at least 2 months of follow-up data. And this is in a phase 3 clinical trial. So efficacy can only be judged in a phase 3 clinical trial. Safety data, you can start collecting earlier. But again, we need to see at least 2 months of safety data from a clinical trial, a phase 3 trial. Now, this is for the emergency use listing. For a full pre-qualification, we would need to see the final data from these clinical trials, both on efficacy and safety, with at least 12 months of follow-up. And of course, for pre-qualification, we also look at a lot of the manufacturing standards. So there's a whole checklist to do that. Now, we have currently issued an emergency use listing for the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, and we're currently looking at the dossiers for Moderna, for AstraZeneca. We're awaiting the dossier from the Serum Institute of India. We're also looking at Sinopharm and Sinovac from China and the Gamaleya product from Russia. So we have at least 13 manufacturers who've submitted initial interest and dossiers, but they will keep on adding the data as they collect from their studies. In terms of using this experience, certainly this is exactly what we should be doing. I've been a TB researcher all my life, and to think that, after 3 decades of being in TB research, we still have not made much progress with a TB vaccine, for example. There were a couple of promising products, but it takes so long to go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. There's a lack of interest, a lack of funding. The same for malaria. You can, for drugs, again, for TB, it would be wonderful to have a short course regimen of 1 month or 2 months to be able to cure TB of all types completely, instead of these long courses of 6 months currently for drug sensitive and up to 2 years for drug resistant TB, with a lot of toxic drugs that patients have to take. So there's a lot of scope now that we've a proof of principle that it can be done for one infection. It should be possible for others.
So, Dr. Swaminathan, just for clarity, you said 12 months of data you would like to see before full authorization, 12 months from the phase 3 trials of follow-up?
Yes, 12 months.
Okay, once the phase 3 is over, the data is submitted, you would like to see 12 months of follow-up after that for full authorization?
For a full, yes.
And is there any threshold for the number of patients?
Yes, so we provided guidance on that as well. We've got guidance on what the clinical trial should look like, and it should be about 20,000 patients per arm is the average, but this can change a little bit based on the incidence of disease and so on. So in countries which have very high incidence of disease, you can get the endpoints much earlier and you could stop earlier. As the disease dies out in some countries or the infection rates fall, it becomes that much more difficult. So it takes longer to accumulate the endpoints. We're also now at a stage where some vaccines are being authorized by countries, and therefore it will become in the future more difficult to do placebo-controlled trials. And therefore we also have a lot of guidance on what kind of clinical trials, what design. If you're doing a non-inferiority design with a vaccine that's 90% effective, then there's a separate design for that. There will also be situations where people want to be vaccinated, or when more supplies become available, we also need then protocols to study people who've been vaccinated in the population and follow them up, both to look at efficacy and to look at safety. So we need to keep on adapting. And in fact, next week we have a big global meeting on the vaccine priorities for 2021, which are clearly different from what it was in 2020. We're also having a big meeting to look at this new variant and what global research needs to focus on.